Welcome to another edition of Trunk and Tales as we navigate what is happening in the world of national politics. I'm Stacy Smith, and since you're watching or listening to this podcast, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button. The president has shown his influence and power in the primary so far this year, but will that carry over to the midterm election, especially with higher prices and the conflict with Iran? And on the Democratic side, the progressive wing of the party is flexing its muscle, winning some congressional primaries. But how strong will the progressives be in the fall? And we'll take a look at the rise of anti Semitism in politics. A lively discussion is coming up in this edition of Trunk and Tales. And with me to talk about this is my panel of political analysts and experts, and they are, on the Democratic side, the Pennsylvania Democratic Party Chairman Eugene DePasquale. Mr. DePasquale also served as the Auditor General for the state of Pennsylvania, holding that office for 8 years, and prior to that, he was elected to the state legislature. He now teaches at Pitt and at York College. And on the Republican side is Keith Schmidt. Keith was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum. Keith also consulted Santorum's 2012 presidential bid, and Keith has his own consulting firm. Two of my regular panelists, former Governor Tom Corbett and Joe Mystic, could not be with us today. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with me. I hope you had a great Memorial holiday weekend.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Good. Well, now, depending on which day you watch the news, scroll through the websites, or perhaps even pick up a paper if you can still do that, you either believe the Democrats are in trouble or President Trump is doing everything he can to make the GOP lose the midterm elections. Neither of those, of course, is true, but there are problems for both parties. So let's begin with the president. In what the political scribes are calling his retribution tour, the president has shown influence and power over his base, and he has prevailed in the primaries. His opposition led to the defeat of several Republican state senators or House candidates in Indiana's primary because they did not go along with his wishes for Indiana to impose some redistricting. His opposition led to the defeat of incumbent Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy. His opposition led to the defeat of Congressman Thomas Massie in Kentucky. His opposition led to the defeat of a Republican candidate for the governor's office in Georgia. And he has come out in opposition to incumbent Republican Senator John Cornyn in the Texas primary. Unfortunately for the president, though, members of his own party, especially in the Senate, are not very happy with some of his decisions. Among other things, they contend that he has allowed the Democrats to make the Texas Senate race a real contest in the fall and will cost the GOP millions of dollars to try to retain that seat. And to quote Republican Senator Don Bacon of Nebraska, "You don't want to have a totally loyal party that's in the minority, and that's where we are headed." So, Keith, as the Republican here today, your thoughts?
Well, you just laid a lot on me right there, Stacy. Well, as I look at the primary tea leaves so far, there is probably a concern with both parties because the primaries are pushing the Republicans further to the right, and the primaries have shown that the progressives are being on the Democratic side are winning the day on their side. And November is pretty much about the middle. Like, who's going to get the middle? And we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot by allowing the fringe of our parties, the proverbial tail to wag the dog. And the president looks like, quite frankly, I'm a little surprised that the president has had such success holding his base together. So I think he's in a position to look at the swing now because, I mean, in narrow majorities in both the House and the Senate, the president is starting to appear like the whip. I mean, he's the one that has to keep the House and Senate very loyal to his agenda because there's such narrow majorities. And oftentimes that happens where you pay a higher price when there isn't any cushion in either chamber. And that's what I look to him as. He's more like a whip. I see how he played in some of these redistricting states. I think he knows that without redistricting in certain states, his fortunes in the fall get very complicated. I mean, he's a transactional guy. He's doing things. None of this surprises me. What does surprise me, to a degree, because of the world that is very, both in America and in the world, there's a lot of angst right now. There's a lot of concern among all Americans. But somehow, even during this turbulent time in America, he's holding his base together. And he just has to hope that the Democrats continually to push to the left, and there might be an opportunity to grab some swing in the fall. He's proven, at least in the primaries, he'll hold the Republican vote strong and sure.
So I think there's two parts to this. One is the president is the public at large incredibly unpopular. I mean, and I'm not saying that
No,
but but he still has. I think Keith and I agree on this. I knew he had support in the party, but it is more ironclad than I had thought, even with his diminishing numbers with the public at large.
right.
And Stacey, you pointed to the challenges my party has, and Keith has as well. I'm not sure they're going to be as reflective this November. I think the challenge our party is going to have to be on, not only disliking Trump, but liking us enough to put us back into power, will really be the test on can we fix that going into 2028. I think in a midterm, it really is a referendum on the president's party. And I would be surprised at this point if we did not win the House, make the Senate very close. And the Senate map is very tough for us. But I do think we have other problems to fix, particularly like what is our agenda moving forward. I think if we win the House and all we do, and again, this is cart before the horse, but all we do is hold hearings on Trump and don't offer our own ideas on healthcare, the economy, whatever, I think you're going to have two historically unpopular parties competing for the White House in 2028. But I think at least in this midterm, I think the president's unpopularity make us the favorite to win the House.
All right, yeah. According to the Cook Political Report, to getting on that, let's see. The House, it says that there are 207 solid to leaning to the Democrats, 210 solid to leaning for the Republicans, and 18 toss-ups, according to the Cook Political Report. And of those toss-ups, 14 are Republicans and only 4 are Democrats. So, depending on how things go and which particular district you happen to be in, the Democrats could indeed retake the House.
Yeah, and Keith, and again, I'm not doing this to say Keith is not correct when he talks about some of the progressive side of this and would they be vulnerable in a general election. I do think in a lot of these swingier House districts, we tend to have both parties tend to have more moderate candidates. So I think you're really going to have a test on who can win that battle of the middle in some of those key House districts. The challenge is, and 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, you had a lot of House members, Republican and Democrat, who, if they had seen it as having good constituent service, well known in their district, they could, they could weather some of these waves. I just think a lot of these elections now are nationalized where we just tend to oscillate back and forth. That may be good for my party this November, but I'm not convinced that incumbents, even if they're popular in their own districts, can weather these waves anymore. We're going to find out.
The concern the Democrats have to have right now is the polling suggests that they'll take the House, but does not suggest a massive wave right now.
Right.
And it suggests that the Senate it will be more competitive, but likely stay Republican. That's hard for me to fathom based on the last 100 days.
That's
This has
right.
been a rough and tumble time for this administration. They are at arguably the low ebb of his first term and this term. He's at the low ebb of his approval and popularity. And it goes to actually Eugene's point that we have to be careful because we just can't be anti-Trump. That's not enough. We're going to have an agenda that we can articulate and that the Americans could grasp and understand what this change means to them. But quite frankly, I bring up this polling because, for all intents and purposes, if you gave me $1 million, I would, and I get to keep it if I win. I would say that the president's popularity is going to be a lot better in November. There are certain things coming to pass here. We all believe that, or not all believe, but I believe that the war in Iran will be worked through. There will be an agreement, and the Strait of Hormuz will finally open, and energy prices at least will start to normalize again. Those type of things will start helping the president and his administration. So, as unpopular as he is now, I believe he'll be a little stronger come November. And the question is, if we're competitive when he's completely unpopular, the fall elections might be more in play than I would suggest. I don't see any scenario though where the Republicans maintain the House, but it might not be the landslide that the Democrats are counting on.
Yeah, look, to me, Keith raises the point, not the argument. The point is that if the president is more popular a little bit post Labor Day, does that tighten us up? I think there's no question about that. I think if the election were today, I think the Democrats, we would have an enormous wave, maybe too dramatic, but we would win, I think, every toss up race if the election were today. But the election isn't today. The question I have is, how does the president get out of this Iran situation? He doesn't have a lot of good options. I think he's got options to end it, but do those options of ending it, do they normalize the gas prices while not alienating his base? That's the challenge he has. And the challenge for us, and I am going to harp on this till somebody listens to me. I don't mean you two. And that is, I believe the sleeper issue in this election is healthcare. I believe rural Americans are concerned about access to, with the Medicaid cuts, what happens to their hospitals. I think a lot of people, both on the left and right, have seen either lost their insurance or their premiums have risen. And I have not seen anybody put together a proposal at the national level that addresses those needs. I think whoever wins that race first, and I don't think it's necessarily about the House this fall, but I think that's the party that's going to win the White House in 2028. I'm telling you, this healthcare issue is a huge issue.
Okay, you raise a good point there. I'm glad you clarified that because you don't think that's going to be the case in the midterms. You're looking at it as probably the major issue in 2028.
Yeah, I'm not here to tell you the cake is baked because I think a lot of things can happen between now and November. But I just think with a relatively either incredibly unpopular or relatively unpopular president, I think he's going to be one of the two. If he improves from what Keith said, which again could happen, he doesn't move into Ronald Reagan territory. That just means he goes back to what he was in about 2018, which I still think we pick up the House. I think the battle royale on this is whose ideas start to gravitate to win for 2028. Because in the midterm, I just think it becomes an anti vote.
All
Eugene
right.
brings up an interesting argument there, and an interesting issue on rural health care. Bridge Connections, my firm, actually represented a issue oriented client in this space for well over a year. I learned a lot, and I realized that this issue is not only coming down the pike; it's here. People haven't grasped it yet. I remember a generation ago when I was still in office with former Senator Rick Santorum, we had a concern over rural healthcare and the trends. 20 years later, it's been eviscerated. I mean, when you look at our own state, our own Commonwealth, when you see the number of hospitals that have closed outside of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and the consolidation of these hospitals, access to maternity wards and long term care and just basic emergency rooms for people now, you have a situation where large parts of rural America would have to travel 3 or 4 hours to get to an emergency room. And it's only getting worse, and it's going to hit. I just think there are so many other more pressing issues right now. We haven't thought about it, but by 28, it's here, and somebody's going to have an answer to it. And that's interesting that I know about it because I was embroiled in this because of a client, but apparently you're hearing it also with the
Yeah.
people you talk to, Eugene. So
What
that issue is hitting both parties.
I was at Democratic picnic, Elk County, not that long ago, and they said it is an hour and a half drive from Elk County, which I know for people in that are listening to this Pittsburgh area may not. It's not that far from here. That it'll take them an hour and a half to get to a maternity ward.
Yeah, it's that. I want to go back to another thing that we briefly touched on, and that is, Keith, you believe that the Iran conflict will be settled to some degree by the time of the midterms. But what about the settlement? As Eugene pointed out, the president doesn't have a lot of great options on this particular thing. If he agrees to a deal that does not do what he wants, which is, eliminate the possibility of a nuclear weapon by Iran, make sure that the Strait of Hormuz is running like it did prior to the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran. Isn't this fodder for the Democrats to hold against the president? In other words, how he gets out of this could be a key election issue. I mean, I can
Well,
see
for
him handling it.
insiders, I think you're right, but for the general public, I don't think you're right. Unfortunately, the situation is complicated for most Americans. They don't look beyond the energy part of this. And quite frankly, the only eyes that are really staring down this conflict is, are we going to be able to resolve it in a way in which gas will return to normal pricing? There's other things in play that are very serious, and I know about it because I follow that, and that was the business I was in for a large part of my life. But the average person trying to get kids to sports events and school events and pay the grocery bills and whatnot, they're just thinking about energy. And to the extent that we can achieve what they think is victory and bring energy down, that will be enough. It's more complicated than that, but in the view of this election cycle, it's all about the price of gas.
All right. One final point on the president, and that is, yes, he has been successful generating activity from his base in these primaries. But there's also a feeling, as I've already pointed out, that members of his own party, especially in the Senate, are not very happy with him, probably because he went against one of their pals. But I mean,
Two of them.
two of them. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, winning as I think you pointed this out, Keith, winning in the primary with your base does not necessarily translate into a fall victory, especially if you cannot carry the independents along with you.
Correct. I understand that. And I pointed that out. I said it's really the fight is the same fight it's been every midterm. Who's going to get the middle? Who's going to get the swing in the independents? And both of them are providing. Both parties, unfortunately, are providing opportunities for the other party because of the fact that their tails are wagging the dog. I mean, in Pennsylvania, there are multiple examples of even in the state house and state senate where the progressive agenda won the day, and are moving more to the left at a time when if they were more moderate, that would be a much easier walk for them in November. There's reasons to believe that there's still a crack in the armor where the Republicans can attack that they're moving too far left.
All right, you bring this up, so we'll move on to this particular one, and that's I was planning to do it, and that is that this is something that I brought up before, and Keith just did, and to me, it's the overriding issue facing the Democrats. And which way does this party go? As is similar with the Republicans, one section of the party seems to be prevailing in the primaries, and for the Democrats, as Keith just pointed out, that is the progressive side. The headline grabbing story in the Pennsylvania primary should have been that a progressive won the nomination for the 3rd District congressional race. Chris Robb, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, defeated Sharif Street, the state senator and a former chair of the state Democratic Party, a position you right now hold, Eugene. He was supported, this is Robb, by the Working Families Party, and had the progressive mayor of New York, the Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, campaign for him. She was in Philadelphia for 4 days. So I'm putting you a little bit on the spot because you're the state party chairman, Eugene, but is this a sign of where your party is now headed?
A couple of things. First of all, I want us to be a Big Ten party. Full stop. I want us to be, and if for us to be a governing majority in the country, we've got to get to where we have center left to center right of the party. And people have to accept that, look, when Reagan won, Reagan was a conservative, but he built that bigger tent, built a bigger coalition. Trump, to his credit, in 2024, again, developed a coalition. Bill Clinton had a coalition. Barack Obama had a coalition. So if we're going to win in 2028, we've got to have that coalition. Rab, I think, won because I think he ran a more energetic candidate, not necessarily because he was the most progressive. I think they saw him as being the bigger fighter in the race. One thing that I think is clear, and this goes back to Trump in 2015, Trump in 2024, I would think Chris Rabb today, and some of these other races in between, is that I still believe the insiders in DC have not figured this out. I could be wrong, but I'm going to tell you what I think this is. I don't think this is about progressive or conservative or liberal or moderate. I think it's about who is anti-establishment and who is seen as fighting for average everyday people. And if you are seen as part of the status quo, you are in electoral trouble right now. And Trump has always been able to survive politically, even with all his other troubles, because he was never seen as the status quo. He was always seen as a person willing to shake things up. And I think Rab won to large part because I think if you are the average Democrat in the congressional district, the PA3 is the most Democratic in the country. If you were the average Democrat in that district, you were sitting there going, we've lost to Trump. I'm tired of losing. Who's going to go up there and shake things up? And I think Rab won that battle in that discussion. Not necessarily because he was the most progressive, although he was, but I think they saw him as the biggest fighter in that, and not necessarily just an establishment figure. And I think that's a big part of this.
Maybe you can answer this question for me, and that is on a nationwide basis, uh, are the progressives winning in the non-urban areas?
There may be some. I'd love to tell you I have all the stats on this, but look, that was again the Philadelphia congressional district one is the most Democratic congressional district in the country. But if you look at some of the other targeted races, Bob Harvey in the Bucks County seat was the more moderate of the two candidates. He won his primary convincingly. In the Pennsylvania 10th congressional district, Janelle Stelson was the more moderate of the two candidates. She won her primary convincingly. And Bob Brooks, though, who won in PA7, was this interesting mix of being a blue collar firefighter, also supported by the Working Families Party. So I just don't think you can put one label on this. I think the candidate that is seen as anti-establishment and fighting for average everyday people, whether it be on the left or the right, is the one that's actually going to have electoral success.
What's
And I think
evident,
too many.
Stacy?
I'm
I'm
sorry. Go
sorry. Go
ahead,
ahead.
Keith.
I
I was
said
going to say that.
what's evident
Yeah.
to me in Pennsylvania and across the nation is the war chests of progressives are growing. I mean,
Oh
they
yeah.
have resources to spend. And interesting, they've taken a page out of my playbook in politics in the last, the 46 years I've been in this vineyard. I always said the one thing technology might have been what technology is, but how you win is still on the ground. And the ground game for progressives is impressive even to a more conservative Republican like myself. They actually put money behind the ground game. A lot of the political operatives don't want or promote ground games because they can't mark it up. But the progressives have figured it out. There's a way that you put boots on the ground and you touch people door to door. And you can see that if you're asking about has the progressive made any inroads outside the cities? They've made inroads outside the cities in our home county of
Oh yeah.
Allegheny
And
County.
absolutely.
They've taken over the North and South Hills municipalities, school districts, boroughs, progressives in the North Hills, in the South Hills. And now they're moving in my area in the West Hills this last election cycle. So they are, and they're doing it largely on the ground with well funded, paid people.
Keith, I want to follow up on Keith's point because my daughter actually lives in PA3, the congressional district. She lives in Philadelphia,
Okay.
recent Temple grad. And now she's, in the mix of voters, she is, obviously younger than all of us. So she has never watched regular television. Never. Maybe she's watched a sporting event on NBC, but like she's
Right.
never actually watched regular television. So all the ads that were on the broadcast, she literally didn't know that happened. She told me that only SEIU and Working Families Party knocked on the door for Rab. No one knocked on the door for the other candidates. So I got that directly from my daughter.
Interesting.
Well, let's talk about this Working Families Party for a second. I mean, they came to light really, I think, in the Pittsburgh area with Summer Lee, if I'm not mistaken, and then also then with the county executive election a couple of years ago. How powerful is this party, as they
It's
call
where
themselves?
the
I mean,
if you want
you want them part of they're running Democratic candidates,
right.
but they call themselves a different party.
Yeah, so certainly they're on the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. That number one, there's no question about that. But this is, sometimes you just whether you like it or not. I don't mean you, Stacy and Keith, but whether people like it or not, that is where the energy is right now. It's not that long ago that if you would have been in Philadelphia and you would have had that machine behind you, it was going to make up 3 to 4 points on election day. It did none of that this past election. The energy is with the progressive left. How long it stays that way, we don't know, but they are the ones knocking the doors. And to Keith's point, in a state house race in the western suburbs, southwestern suburbs of Allegheny County, it wasn't even close.
Cities in America are losing population across the board. Largely, and for there's various reasons. Some of it is the education system is so poor in cities and whatnot. But what we've seen in the last generation, gentlemen, is people leaving the city and populating the near suburbs. And the people leaving the city have a progressive agenda. When they were just in the city, we all let them go. Hey, that's the city. They're progressives. There's not a concern. All of a sudden, everybody's waking up. because now the near suburbs and other places that were traditionally either Republican or old time Democrat are now becoming progressive. And we're saying, what the hell's happening? Well, what's happening is people are leaving the city, and those liberal beliefs and some of those more progressive beliefs are now populating the near suburbs around cities all over America. And it's
Keith,
starting to be a concern that we really try to highlight as Republicans, that you have to stop this wave, and that's marketable for our candidates.
if you want to have some fun, look at the Amtrak train line, the Keystone Rail Line that leaves Philadelphia and goes to Harrisburg, and look
Okay.
at the voting trends over the last decade. As that train has become more popular and more people live in Harrisburg and Lancaster and the Philadelphia suburbs and take that train to work, you look at the last 10 years along that train line, how those areas have become significantly more Democratic and how that's going to impact the Pennsylvania 10th Congressional District and how Lancaster has become not blue, but becoming bluer.
Oh, sure.
That Keystone Rail Line, when I was first elected Auditor General and I would wait in that Lancaster train station to go to Philadelphia because I hate dealing with that traffic, I would be one of 10 people there. There are hundreds of people every morning getting on that train in Lancaster today. And I think this goes to Keith's point. A lot of progressive Democrats left the city of Philadelphia and moved along that train line. They still work in Philly, but they wanted to have a home they could afford in Harrisburg, Lancaster, or the Philly burbs. And then they just get on the train and go into the city for work.
I'd like to bring up one other thing here, and this unfortunately crosses into both parties. But just recently, we've seen more of it in the Democratic side, I think, than we have on the Republican side, and I think it, to me, points to issues within the Democratic Party with anti-Semitism, and that is longtime Democrat, Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice David Wecht says he has now resigned from the Democratic Party over concerns of rising anti Semitism. Eugene, your thoughts?
Um, I know David. I like him. He did not speak to me directly on this. But is there a concern? Yes. I think that in both parties, and there is a concern that I'm not going to. It's nowhere near a majority, but there is an element of both parties now where this is an issue. And so anti-Semitism is real. It's disgusting. It's horrible, but it's real. And I think I think a lot of and again, I'm not blaming social media per se, but I think some of these things get out there in social media. They become simplistic TikTok video answers. And that is where you've seen, I think that's what helped spawn the new rise on some in the Democratic Party. But, David's point is not lost on me that there are a lot of um, I wouldn't even say just Jewish Democrats. I think Democrats across the board that are very concerned about this. I think and not. I don't want to. I think there's always been an element of the Republican Party where this has been there. I think the surprise on many is that there's now growing on the left as well. And I don't mean I don't mean that as progressive, but on the Democratic side. And it's concerning to me because they are our staunchest ally in the Middle East. They have always had our back. You can, in my view, have complete disagreements with Benjamin Netanyahu. You can have disagreements with the war in Iran and still be pro Israel. Somehow those two issues are becoming conflated now, and it's concerning to me.
Well, the
In the
anti
last,
Semitism, just a second, Keith, I'll let you speak. It was shocking to me that there is a Democratic congressional candidate, I think for the primaries at least, in Texas,
Yeah,
who,
Texan.
who came out and she said that Jews should be put into camps. I
I
mean, this is just
Yeah,
remarkable that something like this is happening this day and age.
Stacey. I mean, look. We can't tell people what to think, so people are going to think what they're going to think. I was shocked by that. We used to think when someone came out for a minor tax increase proposal, they were politically crazy. The idea that someone is talking about putting people in the can, and that's not like, wasn't like shy about it. Hopefully the voters in that district handle that the way they need to. But I was shocked by that.
I think what we have to recognize is the crisis and the move towards anti-Semitism is pretty much reserved, unfortunately, for people 40 and under. In the last generation, we've done, in my mind, a great disservice to both people in secondary education and collegiate level education of not talking about the history of the world and the history of the Middle East. And their vision and their narrow scope of what's going on in the Middle East is defined, unfortunately, as both of you have said, in social media. And there's no truth serum in social media. It's literally a propaganda engine. At the same sense of the ultimate price that these horrific events of World War II that was defined by Nazi Germany, and we remember their propaganda. Well, the very same thing is happening. It's almost it's we need truth serum. I mean, I don't know that the people under 40 would have this feeling if they really knew the truth. They are, and it's. I hope it's not over the top, but there is an ignorance of the history of the Jewish people and the Middle East, and they're buying into it in social media. We're losing that war, and it's on us, to the people over 40 who know a much different story on what the truth is, to prevail. And I can tell you, if we just push this aside, the next generation is just going to get worse. We have to right this ship. It's not only a problem, we have to figure it out. We have to resolve this problem, or it's going to get worse.
Keith is 100% right. Look, if we sit around and try to pretend like social media is going to go away and this thing is just going to magically fix itself, it is not. And then we're going to end up having to fight some other battle or war over this thing again. I mean, it's jaw dropping. But Stacey, I want to come back. I want to make clear, because I think I have better case. That congressional candidate, what she said is horrible, disgusting, anti-Semitic, and it is my strong hope that the voters deal with that. But me, as the chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, I will never support a candidate with such a view, no matter what the consequences.
Well said. Thank you, gentlemen. There are lots of other topics we'll have to get into the next time that they're pressing right now, such as the anti-weaponization fund, which I'm sure will bring some comments on that, and then the
I'm sure it'll still
autopsy
be around for
report.
next session.
Yeah.
Oh, that
They'll
that
still
one's
be
not going
talking
away.
about it.
That one's not going away.
But neither is the autopsy report for the Democratic Party that came out.
I could have done the autopsy without spending any money. I don't. They didn't call me. I would have saved them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Inflation and running the guy that was too old. How about that? I just saved every donor a lot of money there.
Yep. I think you did, Eugene. Thank you. We will continue our look at politics on our next edition. Again, if you're watching or listening into this podcast, I ask that you hit the like or the subscribe button on whatever platform you happen to be using. For now, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again for the next edition of Trunk and Tales.